found out something which I think many people will view as profoundly shocking. You'll remember I referred to these emails, News of the World emails that have stayed buried within News International for several years. They were uncovered in 2007 and handed to a firm of solicitors, Harbottle and Lewis, but only passed to the police on June the 20th. Well, I've discovered that those emails, at least some of them, provide evidence that the News of the World was buying the private details, the phone details, the contact details of the royal family and the royal family's friends and connections from a royal protection officer. And the implication, therefore, is that the security of the head of state was in some sense being jeopardized. It is an absolutely extraordinary revelation that what was being purchased, as I say, was private personal details relating to the royal family. Now, I am aware that as soon as the newer management of News International were aware of what was in these emails, which was earlier this year, they appointed the former DPP, Sir Ken MacDonald, to review these papers. His advice was categoric that this was evidence of a very serious criminal activity. He advised the News Corporation board that they needed to pass this stuff immediately to the police, and indeed the information was passed to Cressida Dick of the Metropolitan Police, and that is indeed how this whole new phase in the investigation took place. So what we're saying here is evidence that the private details of the royal family were sold by a royal protection officer to the News of the World.
As you said right at the start, people will find that shocking, that development. Is it possible to say, Robert, who would have seen these emails within News International?
Well, they were reviewed by News International executives at the time of the dismissal proceedings against Clive Goodman, the former royal editor. That's why the emails were gathered. They were gathered because he was contesting his dismissal by the News of the World after he was found guilty and imprisoned for hacking. That's when the emails came to light, for reasons that are actually a mystery. Despite the fact that these emails came to light, they were not passed to the police back in early 2007. Now, you have to assume that they were buried, because it is impossible to believe, I think, that if the most senior people, Rupert Murdoch, James Murdoch, were aware of these emails, they wouldn't have been profoundly shocked and would not at that stage have passed them to the police. I mean, James Murdoch has said categorically that he wasn't aware of this kind of stuff till comparatively recently, and you just have to assume that was the case. But we do know that some executives at News International back in early 2007 were aware of these emails, and the question has to be asked why they stayed buried for so long and why they've only recently been passed to the police.
And Robert, I suppose that dovetails and brings us back to what the politicians are talking about and focused on, this whole notion of whether they are fit and proper as an organisation in terms of this takeover.
Well, I mean, certainly, as you say, it does get us right back to the whole takeover issue and the controls that News Corporation at the highest level had over the News of the World, which appears to have been out of control, and therefore does, as you say, absolutely inform this whole judgment about whether or not the takeover will be allowed by the regulators to go ahead. But I think actually it's just a moment to sort of pause for breath and just think about the implications of, you know, a reputable national newspaper paying a police officer for phone numbers, contact details, for the for those at the highest level within the royal family, and that is how it's been described to me.